Hi, and welcome to Eminent Americans. I'm your host, Dan Oppenheimer, artful dodger of the contemporary American intellectual scene. My guest on the show today is the inimitable Sherman Alexie, poet, novelist, Substacker, and occasional screenwriter. I'd be surprised if you don't already know who Alexie is, given that he's been an award-winning and best-selling writer for decades now and is probably the best-known Native American writer of our time. I asked him on, naturally, to talk about genre television. I had noticed over the past few years that whenever I posted something to Substack about whatever random genre TV I happen to be watching at the moment, which is often an action show like Reacher or some sci-fi show like The Expanse or something like that, Alexi would often pop into my feed to respond. And it became clear that we shared an earnest love of genre TV as emotional comfort food. And I mean, that is a very universal experience, but I'm not sure it's an experience that writers or people who fancy themselves intellectuals tend to be open about having. So I thought it would be fruitful to talk to him about that, and he was happy to come on. And you know, it naturally spins off into all sorts of other issues of the sort that Alexi has written about in all sorts of different forms over the past few decades. So things like childhood, reservation culture, literature, and its relationship to other forms of media, and politics, left, right, white, black, native, Hispanic, south, north, west, east, etc. So all of that is to say that this is an immensely fun conversation. Alexi, he's a good talker, which is not the greater part of the reason why he's been so well-known and famous, but as he himself points out, it's part of it. He's very audiogenic, telegenic, photogenic, all of the above, and we have a kind of rollicking good conversation. One bit of housekeeping before we get to that. My longtime producer, Robert Scaramuccia, is leaving me soon for the greener pastures of graduate school, and so this will be one of the last of my episodes that will bear his direct editorial imprint. He's been a fantastic partner over the last 2 years, and I wish him nothing but the best moving forward. And in fact, Robert and I actually have some other potential collaborations in the works, so we might not even have a pause between the two of us in terms of working together, but for understandable reasons, he can't continue to provide the rather undercompensated support he's been giving to this podcast for the past few years, along with at the same time doing grad school and trying to support himself. So good luck to Robert in those endeavors, though. As I said, he and I will continue to be in touch. It is still to be determined how I will manage the flow of the show going forward. The show will go forward. The show will go on. I still love doing it. I'm still happy to do it. I have some other possible partners who I'm in conversation with, so there may be no real interruption in service whatsoever. There may even be some increases in frequency or at least changes to how the show works that will be interesting and constructive. The worst case scenario, if none of that happens, is that I will go back to editing it myself, which I did for a while at the beginning of the show. And that would just mean, I think, probably that the frequency might dip a bit. Right now I'm doing 3 times a month, maybe go down to 2 or something like that. And I'm sure the precision of the editing would suffer if it's amateur me instead of professional Robert. But the show will still go on the same. I'm still loving it, and so on. So thank you to all of you for continuing to listen and support me, and really enjoy this conversation with Sherman Alexie as much as I did. Peace. Sherman Alexie, welcome to Eminent Americans. It feels a little ironic for me, a white guy, to anoint you an eminent American, but I'm going to do it anyway. So, Sherman, I hereby anoint you an eminent American by the power vested in me by my childhood in Springfield, Massachusetts, birthplace of basketball, a sport that I know has been meaningful to you in your life.
I'll take that. I've shot baskets in there.
You have? In the Hall of Fame?
Oh, yeah. Compared my hand size to Yao Ming.
The specific topic that I wanted to address with you was I noticed from your activity on Substack and mine that we have a kind of overlapping interest in genre television. I mean, we can flesh out what we mean by that. There's a whole universe of these shows that I love. I sort of wanted to start maybe by sort of going back to your childhood and kind of the role that TV played in it. It's funny, I was searching beforehand just kind of for you in television, and I found a poem that you wrote, and I'm not sure when you wrote this. You posted on Substack. I don't know if it's new or if it's old, but it was called the Reservation Broadcasting System. I'm going to read it. It's very short. That was the summer a broken TV served as the stand for a smaller TV that worked. I like that. I like that image. Yeah. So what was TV for you growing up?
Oh, TV was everything. At any point, whatever TV you could have, we had, even though we were poor. So certainly we had the best black and white television when I was very young. And moving up, we always had we were one of the first people on the res to have a satellite dish. We had no money, but we had a satellite dish.
Well, you can have priorities, right?
Yes. So that certainly comes from my father and my mother, who were TV addicts. And for me, it wasn't just the storytelling, which I loved. At one point I could tell you the entire lineup. Back then there were only 4 channels, but I could tell you the entire lineup for the week. TV Guide was the most valuable subscription, and it would come out, I'd pore over it. It was basketball rosters and TV schedules. That was my entire life. It was safe. TV provided safety because you wouldn't be, outside could be very tenuous depending on which bullies were roaming around the res. And I was a frail kid. So TV ended up being my closest friend, which is lovely, sort of, and very lonely, certainly.
Okay, so you're almost 60. How old are you?
Yeah, almost 60. I turned 60 this year.
Yeah, so you're 10 years older than me. When did you guys get the satellite dish? Like, I'm trying to kind of locate you.
Oh, that would have been in the early 80s, maybe late 80s. It was in the 80s. I was in high school.
Okay, so up to that point, you had NBC, CBS, ABC, and then what was the fourth? Was it PBS?
PBS, but we could only get PBS if somebody held onto the antenna.
Okay.
So, we would draw straws. And I was usually the one watching PBS. My siblings weren't necessarily interested in the shows on PBS, except for the kids' shows. But I also like Nova and all the documentaries. So to watch a documentary, I'd have to fight for the TV, and then I'd have to stand and holding the antenna watching it. So that's how desperate I was. I would stand in front of the TV holding the antenna.
So what were the shows? I mean, you mentioned some of the PBS stuff, but what were your stories?
I mean, the big ones would have been Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley. My dad loved, we were just talking about this, my siblings and I, the Rockford Files with James Garner.
Yeah.
In fact, we got so nostalgic and missing our father so much that we started playing the theme song to the Rockford Files, and we just kept playing it to each other and talking about dad. So we were on Zoom and soundtracked our conversation about our father to the Rockford Files. So it's Quincy, Marcus Welby, the Sunday Night Mysteries, which had Columbo, McCloud, and a third one that's escaping me now. So those were big. Gunsmoke, any Western that was on. Yeah. My father was a huge Western fan. So they also broadcast, TV shows from the 50s and 60s regularly. So we would see Black and White Lone Ranger, Hopalong Cassidy, Roy Rogers. That was huge. And it's funny to be Indians rooting for the Cowboys.
I mean, that is the power of narrative, right? It's like, tell us that this person's a hero, and it's like Tony Soprano or like Cowboys attacking Indians, and we will basically go along with it, right?
Yeah, and that's another tribe. That's another tribe. That's not our tribe.
Right. It's not specifically your tribe.
If they filmed our tribe, we would kick the shit out of Roy Rogers.
Right.
Nobody has ever said that sentence before. Oh, I'm remembering another one huge with my dad. Taxi. Huge with my dad. So we would watch Taxi. And then also my dad had a seriously parasocial relationship with MASH.
Oh, really? Okay.
He saw Trapper John, Honeycutt, and Hawkeye Pierce as villains.
Really?
Yes, he saw them as bullies and villains. So he was on the side of Frank Burns a lot of the time.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm trying to remember. It's been a while since I watched MASH. I mean, they were always giving everybody shit, right? I mean,
everybody. They ruled the whole camp. And I mean, you watch it now. I love this show. I still watch it. You watch it now and you realize, oh my God, these guys are totally manipulative narcissists. They're surgeons. That's sort of, synonyms.
Right.
Synonyms. Malignant narcissism, surgeon.
Right. Well, yeah. I was like, when did the era of like totally unself-conscious, arrogant white male privilege end, right? I mean, there was a charisma to that they inhabited, I think.
Yeah, and they inhabited it so well that nobody saw it.
Right.
Or our culture was so used to it that they became heroes because they were so good at it.
I'm sad a little bit that it's gone. It's a flavor, it's like whenever any of these flavors go out of the world in some sense, something's been lost, even if there was a kind of nastiness to them or something like that.
Well, I think what goes wrong is people watch it through contemporary lens.
Yeah.
And they automatically politicize it rather than seeing it as a character sketch. I think people get wrapped up in the idea that you're supposed to root for the protagonist. And if you're not rooting for the protagonist, you can't enjoy the show. But we all love to watch villains too. So I think certainly in the Native community and in other, BIPOC, brown and black people, I think there's a tendency, especially among the academic elite, to only view those TV shows through a political lens rather than as entertainment. It's easy to watch Tony Soprano for everybody, to watch Tony Soprano, but you can apply that same thing to everybody, every show. And it's okay to see a show from the past and recognize that it holds a lot of politics that are upsetting now, but to take that upset and use it as part of the watching. Oh, this is pissing me off. This storytelling is pissing me off. This character is pissing me off, and I'm enjoying this.
Yeah, yes, I agree. I was just thinking. My wife and I just watched Breakfast at Tiffany's with our daughter, with our 18-year-old. Just because it's a great movie. And I don't know if you've seen it recently, but do you remember the Mickey Rooney character?
My son just watched it for the first time. He's a huge cinemaphile, but it was the first time, and he came down. What was that?
I guess, the only pushback I had was like, we can laugh at it. We can appreciate it as like insane. Like, it's so over the top, that sort of like stereotypical representation of like a Chinaman or something. I guess he's Japanese or something. Like, it's so over the top. It's almost hard for me to believe they didn't know it was kind of racist back then. Like, I can appreciate it in a sort of critical way. It does break the spell of the movie for us now. For me, it does.
I would like to think that Billy Wilder could come back from the dead and edit it out.
Yes.
And then you'd have a 99% perfect movie instead of 92% perfect.
Right. But this brings something up. So like you mentioned, watching the sort of cowboy shows as an Indian, and had it been your tribe, the cognitive dissonance would have been too great. What was it like watching all these shows as an Indian kid, in which I would think the only representation, of Native people was in those kind of Westerns? I don't know. Was there anything ahead of its time? Or, there weren't even, stock stereotypical characters in contemporary shows back then, were there? I'm trying to remember.
TV shows, not really. There was a Chuck Connors one about Geronimo, or was it? Yeah, I think Geronimo, where he played Geronimo. And I have vague memories of that. Positive representations, but still loaded with stereotypes.
Yeah. Was it an issue? Did you identify with everyone? Did you identify with like the other minority characters as kind of a proxy for you guys? Like, what was the...
Well, that's one of the things, I suppose, because there's so few of us Native Americans. There's just a couple million. So I identified with everybody.
You let go of that expectation, kind of. You didn't have that expectation.
Yeah. And the first time I felt like a movie was talking about us or felt that it captured us was Little Big Man, a movie starring Dustin Hoffman, if you remember that, where he played Jack Crabb, a white man who was adopted as a child, kidnapped as a child, to be raised by a Sioux tribe. And then he goes back and forth between being a white guy in the white world and being an Indian in the Indian world, and then the collisions. But it was the first time I saw the wild sense of Native humor on screen. And that was one of the things about all the TV shows. There was never a funny Indian except F Troop. And then that was blatantly racist, that even as a kid, I knew that was wildly wrong. So Little Big Man. But on TV, it took a long time. I'm trying to remember the first TV show with a accurate, I don't want to say positive because it's fine to play a villain too. But I'm trying to think of the first TV show where I saw an Indian and thought, oh, that's us. Oh, it's funny. It would have been something like King of the Hill with Joel Turnipseed.
Oh, yeah. That's so late. Isn't that crazy?
I'm sure there's something else, but nothing is coming to mind right now. Or Michael Horse in Twin Peaks. It was a pretty small role, but he was cast as a sheriff or as a deputy. So there was an Indian in an authority position who was a good guy. Wasn't the star. He was very secondary, but he was also a positive representation. I suppose there were one-offs. Like I think of the title of the episode is actually The Indians in the Lobby. I think that's the name of it. West Wing. There was an episode of West Wing where
interesting.
Gary Farmer and Georgina Lightning played two natives who stood in the lobby of the West Wing and wouldn't leave until they saw the president. because they were there to address their tribe issues and Native American issues in general. And I love that representation, the tenacity and the determination of two Indians to be heard. So I really appreciated that. And I love the West Wing. So to have two Indians on there as heroic figures, but not heroic figures bureaucratically, because that's the war we fought now for decades, is not with violence, but with paperwork. So to see paperwork Indian heroes was awesome.
It's interesting. I do want to get to you. You mentioned humor, and I have a lot of questions about that because I like growing up in Massachusetts. The names in Massachusetts are like full of native words, but the tribes were basically kind of wiped out. So there's not much of a living native culture in Massachusetts. So I didn't know much about native culture, period. And then I ended up having a friend who was from upstate New York, I think Mohawk. He didn't grow up on the reservation, but his parents had, and he was pretty connected. And him telling me about kind of native humor. And this was a revelation to me. So I'm interested in that because I'm not sure people even now know that, though there haven't been more representations of it. But I kind of wanted to go back to what you were saying earlier about how like TV was like your friend and it was like safety. And I do think this gets to like what, for me, like the genre stuff in particular does, because it's safety, it's solace, it's like retreat. When I am stressed, when I am in distress, almost the first thing, often the very first thing my brain, my body wants to do is seek out some kind of action show, detective show, science fiction show. It's not Sopranos, it's not Mad Men, it's not whatever complicated prestige television, might be out there. For me, it's just like, I kind of know what I'm going to get.
It comes down to Aristotle and the 3-act structure. The beginning, the middle, and the end, the comfort of that structure. And, early TV religiously obeyed the 3-act structure. So we knew what was coming. There was going to be resolution. There was no unpredictability. And in this unpredictable world, growing up in poverty, which is wildly unpredictable, growing up as a native was wildly unpredictable, to turn on a TV and know that everything was going to be okay, that every problem would be solved, that everybody would end up in either a better place or the same place they were when the episode started. And only rarely were there tragedies that did not get healed.
Yeah.
So psychologically speaking, it's certainly, you entered worlds where, the Fonz wasn't a 37-year-old guy hanging out with teenagers. You entered, especially the procedurals, cop shows.
Yeah.
99% of the time in early TV, they caught the bad guy. And it was the same thing week after week, beat, 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 beat. So the rhythm of that provided me a stability that didn't exist elsewhere.
It's interesting. As you're talking, I was also thinking there's the role, the sort of the family in these shows, which is sometimes it's like Happy Days, where it's like a kind of stereotypically a happy family in which even whatever disharmony there is so mild, right, compared to actual family disharmony. But then in the cop shows, there's the work family, right? I mean, it's these families that provide sort of the consolation of family or without essentially the distress. Unless you're in like a top tier, I don't know what percentile of families one would have to actually be in to sort of experience anything remotely like that. But it wasn't my family, right? Like my family was a lot of distress. And family on TV, whether it was a work family or it was, whether it was the NYPD on Law and Order or it was Happy Days or something like that, was immensely reassuring.
We get to see the ideal. And as you mentioned, the assumed families, that really hit me in the heart when you talked about the work families, because there were families that I admired, parents that I admired for their parental skills and what seemed to be a more happy household. But then again, our house was the safe one on the res for kids. Doors were never locked, and we'd have kids at our house a lot of the time. And at all hours of the day, they would come in to eat or to watch TV. So we'd sit around watching TV together. And then when I transferred schools and left the reservation school and went to the white farm town on the border and ended up making friends, and I'd go to their house and they had set dinner times.
Yeah.
And they'd all sit together.
Right.
It was so bizarre to me. I'm sure there are Native families that did that, but ours didn't. And I wasn't familiar with any that did that. Every night they had the ceremony of dinner together. And the first time at my friend's house, the Feases, when we sat down for dinner, I started crying because it was a kind of comfort I'd never previously felt. Something so ordinary could feel so profound.
Well, what was the safety? I mean, I'm curious about the safety in your own home. You said yours was the safe family, and I don't know much. I mean, I know the Wikipedia version of your family. I mean, your dad was a drinker, right? But maybe that happened outside the home. I mean, what was the safety of your family?
Well, our house was a party house until I was 7.
Okay.
And then my mom sobered up, and my mom was sober the rest of her life. So our house it was a not party house. My mom did not allow alcohol into the house after age 7. So we didn't have to deal with that unpredictability in the home. So when my dad went drinking, he'd leave, which created all sorts of problems. I think I'm an insomniac partly because I wouldn't go to sleep when he was gone because I didn't want to miss him returning home. So I would force myself to stay awake, and a few times ended up in the ER because I wouldn't go to sleep.
Because you were worried about him, or you just didn't feel safe till he was home?
Yeah, I was worried about him. I spent all my life waiting for the phone call that he had died in a car wreck.
Yeah.
Or later when he developed diabetes, that he had died of diabetes sitting drunk on a couch somewhere on his reservation. He was from a different tribe. I mean, I'm half of him, but he was Coeur d'Alene and I'm Spokane, where I'm enrolled. So he'd often end up back on his reservation with his Coeur d'Alene relatives. And when I got older, we'd go get him. After too long a period, especially because he had diabetes, we would get in the car and go find him and bring him home.
Yeah.
So that was certainly, terribly traumatic and still affects me, but it didn't happen in the house. And our mom was bipolar, I believe, undiagnosed. But, you ride those waves of depression and mania. And when she wasn't manic or depressive, she was very impressive. She was a tribal leader, a religious leader, a spiritual leader. So with her, we grew up inside the culture, the best parts of the culture, and they were kind. Both of them were capable of great kindness. And even my mom in many ways, my mom was better to people outside the house than she was to us. She was better with other people's kids than she was to us.
Well, I was going to ask, actually, so when, you're talking about the kind of the open door in your house and other kids are coming in and out, did your mom have that capacity, even if she was in a period of kind of mania or depression or something like that, to kind of be together for visitors, for guests?
She could usually put herself together.
Yeah.
Her depressions, she would, as I tend to do, she would just simply stay in bed. And her bed was the living room couch. That's where she slept, which also at many points in my life became my bed. So even if she were in a depressive state, lying there on the couch, she wouldn't kick anybody out. The kids would come to the house and we'd be watching TV and she'd just be on the couch.
Was she on the couch to watch TV?
No, she was face to the cushion. And no, the worst time I remember was when Elvis died. She laid there on the couch she'd get up to eat a little or go to the bathroom, but she was on that couch for, probably a week.
But people would just come in and out even then.
Yeah. I mean, because, it's the res, mental and emotional problems are pretty prevalent. So having a mom zonked out on the couch depressed was pretty safe because that's nothing more predictable than abject depression.
Well, and it sounds like, and your dad was safe when he was at home.
Oh, my dad was a very kind and gentle and soft-spoken man. Even when he was drunk, it's one of my jokes. You've never met a sweetheart of an alcoholic like my father was.
Yeah.
He was nonviolent, non-mean. Only a couple times did he ever raise his voice at us. He was a really gentle spirit. His father died in Okinawa in World War II, and then his mother died 6 months later of tuberculosis.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So my father and his sister were war orphans. They were raised by their grandmother, but they were war orphans. And I think in a sense that turned him into an ambassador of himself. And they got the GI death benefit money, which enabled them to go to Catholic school on purpose. So they moved to the city of Coeur d'Alene, and he ended up like I ended up being, the sole Indian in a white school. So I think he learned how to conduct himself in a way. He didn't create waves. He
Yeah.
made friends. So yeah, an ambassador of himself, which is a term I just made up, which perfectly captures who he is.
Well, I hope it shows up in a, poem or story, and I'll
Yes,
know.
it will. I'm already looking for the rhymes. In the place called hell, my father was an ambassador of himself.
There you go. I'm curious, when you started writing, did you have, I'm thinking about TV and fiction. It's probably a less fraught sort of union these days. We're all such poptimists or something like that. We've all such kind of assimilated pop culture as like legitimate material. But certainly when you were coming up as a writer, I think the default perspective would have been to view television as an enemy of written fiction in some sense. And I'm wondering whether that was a kind of struggle you had. Because it's also, it's the material of our childhoods, right? It's like it's so much, even for those of us who read a lot, as you did, as I did, like TV, movies are so much the kind of narrative raw material of our imaginations. It's there, right? I don't know. How did you think about it?
I didn't know enough about poetry to know it was weird.
Okay. So unselfconsciously.
Yes. And some of my early poetry education was with the Beats, Allen Ginsberg and Gregory Corso. And they were involved with pop culture, especially rock and roll. So rock music played a big role in poetry, in avant-garde poetry and alternative poetry in the 50s and 60s. So when I started reading that, I connected immediately. But when I started reading Native American poetry for the first time while I was in college, they were immediately immersed in Native culture, which is immersed in pop culture. So I'd never known a life where pop culture wasn't a huge part of my life, and I was writing about my life. So it was naturally in there. And that immediately marked me as different, though. I wrote about pop culture in a way and combined that with Native American life that I was original in a way that shocked people. I was writing things, but I sounded res.
Yeah.
Most Native poets, very few Native writers and poets are actually res-raised who grew up on the reservation, especially now. We were talking about this last night, a friend and I. We couldn't be sure, but I think there are less than 10 regularly publishing Native writers who are from the reservation, from their reservations or tribal communities. It's a very...
Out of a population of how many do you think? If you had to estimate.
There's probably, I would guess there's 500 publishing Native writers. That's a rough guess.
And so 10 of them.
Yeah, something that low of a percentage.
What do you think the median experience is of the 490 in relation to the culture?
Well, more than half of them probably have just a grandparent who's Indian. I would venture their grandparent was relocated in the 50s or 60s, the government program which took Indians off the reservation and put them in the cities. It was an effort to educate Indians and to wipe out tribes. It had two purposes. And that disconnect happened almost immediately for them, the cultural disconnect. And then they had kids and then they had grandkids. So the disconnection is even stronger. And they have all my empathy. I want to put that out there. The disconnection, they have my empathy. I have friends who are in that situation. But what that did is turn them into writers who are always seeking the connection. So they're not even writing about who they are. A mixed blood native, somebody with one Indian grandparent or one Indian parent, rarely writes about being half white or 3/4 white. They only write about being Indian.
Right.
And not about the complicated and interesting and dramatic life. I'm always getting after them. You realize that like 90% of Indians are like you in the country, are exactly like you from these biracial or multiracial families. Write about it.
Right. You're saying, oh, okay, I get it. It's not like write about being white in the sense that like the parts of you that are white. It's that actually, in some sense, the median Native experience
is multicultural.
Is multicultural. But you're saying, so having come from the res, first of all, you don't have to prove your authenticity, right? That's always in the mix. You don't have to prove your authenticity. There's not something you're looking to connect to. And then I guess, implicit to what you're saying is where people go when they're looking to connect is not the things about Native culture that everybody shares, right? It's not basketball. It's not pop culture. It's whatever's distinctive. Or am I putting words in your mouth, or is that kind of like...
No, Well, I captured what it feels like to be a res Indian.
Right.
I mean, that's what I wrote about. Less so now. I mean, I've been urban for 3 decades, and I wrote about it in such a way that other Indians saw themselves in it. They immediately recognized themselves. And there have been Native writers before me who did the same thing. James Welch, Scott Momaday, who did the same thing. But what I say is I'm the first practitioner of the Brady Bunch School of Native American Literature.
Meaning what?
That pop culture was just as present in my work as Native American culture and Spokane Indian culture is. And I was the first one to capture that. So I could write poems where Clint Eastwood was in there. In a positive, oh no, let's put it this way. It just occurred to me, you're helping me here, Mr. Oppenheimer, that I was the first one to present a positive portrait of American culture.
Oh, interesting. In Native literature.
In Native literature. I was the first one who saw all of it as positive. I mean, it was easy for a Native American to love rock and roll. That's always easy. But to see the dominant culture, to use a academic phrase, a political phrase, to see the dominant culture not completely in a negative light, but to see the parts of it that are beautiful. That's one of my issues with decolonization, that term in the Native world. We need to decolonize.
Yeah.
Aside from the fact that even when Natives say it, it's basically a white leftist anti-capitalist position. It just has a different name. But what decolonization does is it vilifies white culture, the dominant culture. And it also assumes that we haven't contributed to it all along. But I'm the first writer who didn't see the culture through that lens, or not exclusively. And I still remain one of the few writers who doesn't see the dominant culture in those terms. Even though all of those writers participate in pop culture, love pop culture, they put their academic critical lens on in their work. And I didn't do that. I didn't even know how to do that when I first started writing poetry. I had no concept of vilifying white culture.
I'm interested in that. I would have assumed there was some sort of default kind of oppositional stance towards the dominant culture growing up on the reservation, just because the story, of how, Europeans colonized, not just colonized America, but just like treated Native people like shit. Killed them, drove them onto reservations, broke treaties with them. There must have been some default kind of oppositional narrative, if not the one that necessarily people who have just learned about in academia understand it to be, if a more complicated one.
No, of course. I grew up in poverty. I grew up with Indian Health Service. I grew up with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I was always aware of what happened to us. And my early work is also political. But as you were saying that, I thought, well, what is my response to that? It's funny. Lenny and Squiggy did not colonize me.
You're speaking my language in a sense, because I'm of the sort of like Albert Murray? Have you like the Omni Americans? I'm of the sort of like mongrelization school of, or like Leslie Fiedler, and like of American culture that, as you said, it's not just that we're all inheritors of it. Native people are contributors to it going back to the beginning, right? Or before the beginning or something like that. So you're speaking my language in the sense that like we are all the producers of these things in various ways. So to deny it and reject it is very easily falls into just being a rejection of who we are, right? Like what would it mean? It's possible to grow up where TV is such a central part of your life and then just reject it as like white people slop or something like that. But to do that in a healthy fashion would require, decades of really good therapy or something, which is not what people are doing because it's our inheritance, right? So, I'm trying to think of trying to just kind of drill down on like the nuances of what it was for you, right? Lenny and Squiggy had not colonized you. The United States, in some sense, as an entity, had colonized you or left you in a bad place. At some point you must have, I don't know. When you're watching these things now with an adult, sophisticated, critical lens, it must be a different experience.
Well, yeah. What did Scott Fitzgerald say? The sign of a superior mind is the ability to hold two opposing ideas at the same time.
Yeah.
So I can watch a piece of art and experience it as a fan, as an audience, as a receptacle. But part of my brain can also be interpreting it through a political, cultural, social lens. I can do both at the same time. Everybody does that at the same time. Doing that does not negate my enjoyment of any particular work of art. I don't understand the people who can't do that or who refuse to do that, or who don't admit they do that.
I was going to say, as you said, like, we're all watching Bridgerton, right? It's just who's not admitting it when they're writing or something like that.
I haven't seen Bridgerton.
Well, maybe it's not your genre. I don't know. Like, rom-com is my genre too. So like, it's...
Oh, I know. I have no genre.
Did you run into pushback in that? Like you're saying, you were kind of the first native writer to treat pop culture and sort of aspects of the dominant culture in a fundamentally non-alienated way, right? And did you encounter critical pushback either from sort of among other native writers or just the critical establishment for doing that? You were also such a kind of remarkable, phenomenal success that I would imagine there was a lot of hesitancy amongst at least other native writers to sort of openly criticize you in any way.
No, I quickly became a villain in the native literature circles, and I remain a villain in native literature circles. A large part due to its success. I mean, I was a literary star quickly. I mean, my first poetry book came out in the spring of 1992, and about 14 months later, I had a short story in Esquire.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and all part of that is I also had this whole thing that other writers don't have is, I mean, I'm 6'2". I look good on camera.
Mm-hmm.
I have public speaking ability. I'm funny. So, I mean, one of the first interviews I did with Men's Journal, they called me telegenic, which I had to look it up. What does that mean? So I had the kind of built-in mass media skills, which the big part of public speaking came from me being a debate person in high school and doing speech competitions through the Future Farmers of America. So the reason why I was great on the Colbert Show is because of sitcoms and the Future Farmers of America. So beyond and below and around all that is that I'm a great writer. So mass media skills plus my writing, and it launched me. And it continues to launch, right? I still maintain, it's been 30 some years now, and I'm still selling books, which is quite an accomplishment. It's, me and the mystery writers. To be a literary writer and sustain the success is really unusual. And part of that is work ethic. Part of that is I still remain the Indian. I don't take that for granted that I'm overrated and underrated because I'm an Indian.
I'm trying to picture you in high school. So you were on the basketball team, which is a popular kid jock thing to do. You were on the debate team, which is generically a nerd thing to do. You were a big reader and writer. Were there other Indian kids at this school, or were you the only one?
I was the only one my first year, and then my sisters and my best friend came the next year. And year by year since then, increasing numbers. Right now, my sister said there's something like 72 kids at Reardon, K through 12. In fact, there's so many that they have a wait list.
So who were you? I mean, I couldn't predict from that. You could be, Barack Obama, where you're like, you kind of end up, at his prep school in Hawaii, where you're cool and popular and you're this sort of, hybrid third culture kid or something like that. Or you could be alien. Like, were you popular? Were you mixed?
Oh, I was wildly popular in Reardon. In Welpinut, I was not. The skills I had in Welpinut didn't translate to popularity. I certainly had friends and I had close friends. So I wasn't a pariah, but I was certainly bullied. And you look back and you learn, okay, the bullies were getting bullied at home. So there were miserable kids taking out their sorrows on me because I was the most convenient target. So I have empathy for all of them in my adulthood.
Were you the same person in some sense?
Oh, yeah.
You were. So you were well socialized on the res. You just weren't popular for it. And that socialization kind of translated to just this different context. Did that translate to getting white girls?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I'm thinking this is like early 80s or something like that. Like, it's shocking to me. I mean, it shouldn't be. I say this as a white guy, and you imagine sort of people of color will kind of roll their eyes. Like, it's shocking to me how recently just kind of naked, blatant racism was pretty acceptable in large parts of the country. And certainly in the 80s.
It's still acceptable in large parts of the country.
That's what you were going to say, right? Okay, so fine. Do you think unself-conscious racism is acceptable in vast parts of the country now? I would have said no. Plenty of racism, but maybe not a kind of unironic, unself-conscious version of it.
No, that's always been rare.
But the white girls liked you. Your parents were fine with you?
I mean, a big part of it is simply who I am. I mean, I'm a kind, smart, athletic dude, and I look good. But the other part of it, there was a faux exoticism. I was a res kid, so there was a sense that I was different. And, biologically speaking, I brought a whole new gene set into the community. So,
I was going to say, why faux? It is a different culture. I mean, it shares a lot.
But I mean, where I was 20 miles away from the school, so
right.
And I was also I was like them. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I became popular. I was going to college. I was a scholar jock, which was very popular there. I ended up in a generation at Reardon that hadn't existed before and hasn't existed since. To give you some idea, my senior year, my basketball team, the varsity basketball team, out of the 12 of us, 11 have graduated from college. And then the other ones spent their life in the military. So we're talking about 12 highly accomplished boys on the same team.
Interesting. So for whatever reason at that moment, to be a good student, to be a jock, we're not in opposition.
No, not at all. Our team grade point average for the whole team was 3.76. So we were a smart bunch. And so, I mean, I got there and yeah, I faced racism at Reardon, certainly. I mean, I had two serious girlfriends, and both of them, the relationships extended into college years as well, particularly with one. And one of their mothers at one point, in high school, they wouldn't let her visit me on the reservation because she said Indians are too angry.
Mm-hmm.
So she was worried about the reception of my girlfriend on the res, even though we had white people on the res.
But you were fine. I mean, they didn't have a problem with you.
Well, I mean, it would be kind of passive. Like when you'd walk into a basketball court for a game and you'd see a certain ref who you knew was blatantly anti-Indian on the court, and who knows about their personal lives. But you'd walk on. I remember, and my white teammates and coaches learned that was the case. And I remember we were at a game in Freeman, and this is not a comment on the community of Freeman, but we saw that ref who was from Spokane or wherever. And we walked onto the court, and in the pregame, coach said, okay, we're probably not going to have Sherman for the whole game, so this is the plan. And he called a foul on me on the tip-off.
Probably not funny at the time, but funny in retrospect, yeah.
Yeah, and I fouled out in the first minute of the third quarter.
That's so televisual. I'm sorry. I just saw that as a scene in a TV show. You're in the locker room before the game and your coach is like, all right, we're probably not going to have Sherman. I mean, that's a whole, what a great structure to a TV show, to an episode or something like that.
It would be an after school special. And then part of the speech competition, there was a speech competition, impromptu speech, extemporaneous speech in the Future Farmers of America, where you'd get your topic and then you'd have an hour to prepare your speech. I was really good at it. And it was the state quarterfinals or semifinals, I'm not sure. And we did the competition. And I was first on all the ballots except for one where I was last.
Uh-huh.
And that knocked me out. It was enough to knock me out.
It was their equivalent of the East German judge or something like that?
Exactly. I hadn't even thought about it in those terms. And the East German judge gives you a 0.0. Right. But on the comment card, the negatives said he needs a haircut.
Uh-huh.
And my hair was probably about as long as it is now. But in the 1980s in small farm towns, my hair was hippie.
Right.
And then the other thing is he talks funny. And back then I still had my reservation accent, which sounds like this. There's a sort of sing-song Irish American rhythm to it. And so when I gave my speeches, I had this accent. But this is very very Native American.
Yeah, what is that accent? I mean, it's very distinctive. And I haven't known if it's regional to the parts of the country where people came from, but it feels like a native accent or reservation accent. And I don't know what it is.
We don't either. It's sort of west of the Mississippi River. If you're a reservation Indian, you have this accent.
Huh.
And it probably has, what I joke around, say it's actually the Elks Lodge secret handshake in the Indian world. So if you hear Indian talking like this, you go, they're res. So in my early days when I was traveling the world and I would drop into that, well, in the earliest days of my career, I still had it. But whenever I drop into that in Native communities, oh man, the warm connection with everybody. So yeah, I mean, my hair and my accent. And so my Future Farmers of America advisor, Fred Springer, who died recently, that was the first time. Well, what happened was in Reardon, my close friends and my coaches, for the first time, they got to look at the parts of their world that were obviously racist. I mean, they saw their colleagues, the racism of their colleagues, which they hadn't experienced because everybody in their communities was white.
Right.
So I think I changed a lot of people in that community based on other people's reactions to me. And a lot of them have reverted. Some of my classmates.
They got Trumpy?
Well, very Trumpy. And personally, it's heartbreaking. Sociologically, politically, I look at it and I remember it's funny. I mean, you do all this stuff. The conservatives of my youth were Reaganites. There was still a certain amount of empathy and dignity, and that's gone.
Yeah.
I'm not on social media with any of them, Facebook, but my sisters inform me about what some of my former classmates say and do. And it's awful. And that's not the person I grew up with.
Yeah. I find myself wanting to put on my Ross Douthat hat and say the problem was that everybody got de-churched, that the church for a lot of people was kind of keeping the worst of those impulses at bay. And then we just sort of secularized and...
I would agree with him to a large degree. I'm an atheist. I'm not a churchgoer. But in the native world, what I see, and in fact, I experienced it this weekend, where so many young natives and older natives, but so many young Native Americans' entire native identity is based on politics.
Yeah.
Rather than on culture. It's not about dancing and singing. In fact, the powwowing Indians are the most happy. If you're a dancer and singer, you're happier, way happier than Indians in general. So the ones who are participating in the art of being Indian are happy. But the ones who've based almost their entire native identity on being political, on decolonization, et cetera, they're miserable. And where does that misery go? How is it expressed other than as anger at the world and anger at yourself?
So has that colonized reservation life in your sense, that politicization?
Not to the degree it has with urban Indians. I mean, there's nobody unhappier than a college-educated Indian. And, I go into these university communities and I would get people to get mad at me because I would say to them, you've got the college. That means you've leapt over so many real and imaginary barriers and boundaries. You've won. You're going to be an Indian with a college degree. You're going to be a superhero. And many of them don't buy that. In fact, I had a conversation dinner last night with a very educated PhD native friend of mine. And he was talking about his friends and people we know in common. And we are now into the world where there are Ivy League children of Ivy League Indian graduates, Ivy League grandchildren Indians of Ivy League grandparents. And I mean, talk about victory.
Well, nobody in our society, you've tapped into an endless complaint of mine or observation, which is nobody thinks they've won, right? Other than you and me. I mean, I think I get the sense you feel like you've won, and to some extent, I feel like I've won. But I mean, Donald Trump doesn't think he won. Elon Musk acts like he didn't win. Who thinks they won in our society? We'd be much better off if there was some group of elites who felt good about having, conquered the heights of society. But everybody feels victimized by everybody else. It's very depressing. I mean, how do you have a functioning society when even the winners think that they're losers?
Well, you don't. This is where we end up.
Right.
And to celebrate success. Well, I always think of the movie Broadcast News, where William Hurt says to Albert Brooks, what do you do when your reality exceeds your dreams?
Mm.
And Albert Brooks says, you keep quiet about it. I'm not all that quiet about it. I'm also bipolar and depressive and manic, and I've screwed up my life in multiple ways, but I can afford the therapy.
Right. Yeah, I always feel like if you've succeeded, you sort of owe it to the rest of the world to some extent to have some gratitude for it. There are exceptions to that, but I'm curious. This is an aside, but I've thought about this. I did an episode of my podcast with two other writers who were baseball players and relatively successful baseball players. So I'm interested in writers who were athletes and kind of what that experience was like. And also interested. You mentioned that there were a bunch of smart guys on your basketball team, and that sounds like a lot of fun. And I'm wondering if it was for you guys.
Oh yeah. And that's extended into my adulthood because I kept playing basketball, recreationally, very competitively. And I was always good. So I was good enough to be in games where everybody was better.
Yeah. And you're tall. You're relatively tall, right? You said you're 6'2".
Yeah. And if you were better than me, that meant you were very good. So in college, I could stay on the court with Division I players. I would be all the way down at the bottom of the pile, but I could stay on the court. But even now, my closest friend group, Friday night, we screened my movie that's been resurrected from 2002, has been playing in theaters around the country and played in Seattle last night. And 5 of the guys who came were guys I play basketball with or played. I retired a few years ago, but these are incredibly smart, highly accomplished dudes who are also 6'5", highly educated, incredibly pop culture and literary culture versed. They're a bunch of brilliant dudes who are also incredible basketball players. So I've extended my high school teammates into my adult life.
Do you remember the banter, the jokes of the team, the high school team? And I'm projecting a little bit. I mean, I was a wrestler in high school, and I happened to end up, I would not say characteristically wrestlers are particularly sophisticated people. I just happened to end up, my class on the wrestling team was like you're describing, was a bunch of very smart guys. And we had a blast. We were very funny. I mean, we were very smart, and we were very funny with the experience.
Well, I mean, part of it was certainly that we were the Porky's generation, so there was a lot of dirty jokes.
Right.
But since we were all reading the same books assigned by our English teacher, who follows my Substack, by the way.
Oh, is that right?
Yes. So a big reason I'm a writer is because of her. And she had us reading Gatsby in a farm town high school. So part of it was joking about books and things and TV, talking TV and music. But as with any straight males, and we talked about girls. Biologically, again, right? We played basketball and we got smart to make us more and more attractive to girls. I mean, we certainly love those things ourselves, but it was also about standing in the world. That's what we all do all the time.
What do you watch now? I'm gonna jump forward. What are your shows now or over the last 5 or 10 years?
Oh my gosh. It's mostly sitcoms.
Is it? Okay.
Right now, certainly, I've been in probably a 2-year swing of sitcoms and classic sitcoms. I've become about TV kind of the way I am about music, rock, where I'm relying on the rock music of the past. Sort of I'm relying on TV of the past, but not going that far back. My latest obsession, and it was a show that lasted a while, but didn't get the kind of critical acclaim as others did, is Superstore.
Oh, that's interesting. My brother's a big fan of that show. I haven't really watched it. Okay.
Yeah, with Ben Feldman and America Ferrera as the leads.
Basically working in a Walmart or something like a...
Yeah, Walmart, the life of Walmart. And first of all, it so captures I've worked service jobs. I never worked at that kind of store, but I worked pizza and sandwich and dishwashing. So the camaraderie.
Yeah.
And the antagonism of your coworkers. And what it captured, the madness of customers, the insanity of the customers. They have these little asides, brief vignettes of the insanity of customers. and yeah, the relationships, the love, the hate, the job, love the people, all of it so captures me. And I've watched it. I mean, I've seen every episode now in the past year at least 10 times. I fell asleep to it last night. It's one of my comfort things.
Yeah.
I have night terrors and nightmares, and it helps to have comforting voices in the night. So last night I fell asleep to the Halloween episode where one of the former employees who was a creep, he ended up stuck on a wall because he was trying to get to the women's bathroom, and he ended up dying in the wall, and they found him on Halloween. And people listening, that's funny? And like, yeah, it's hilarious. And so I fell asleep to the guy in the corpse hanging out of the wall on Superstore last night. So that's a big one. I've recently resurrected my love for Law and Order.
I mean, yeah. I mean, the amount of hours I've spent watching Law and Order is embarrassing. I mean, I remember when at my loneliest, in my 20s, when I was living on my own in New York and I didn't have much going on. I mean, I'd come home from work and Law and Order were my friends, and then the friends were my friends. I mean, there is some sense in which I 100% believe that, like, people who have that familiarity, they feel, I mean, look, it's like 10% or something, but they're doing something to our brain that's like being around people who are our friends, right? There's something about our experience of them that's similar.
Oh, yeah, right there. Yeah, exactly. But I think the show I think is the greatest show in history that I'm still obsessed with is Succession.
Oh, what a show.
I think that's the greatest show in television history. So I'm still living in that.
Interesting. Do you rewatch it? We haven't rewatched. I mean, my wife and I watched it, and then they felt this great sense of grief when it was over. I mean, I think they ended at the right place, but do you rewatch it?
Yes. I haven't rewatched it straight through, but I go back to certain episodes.
I was going to say, yeah, so not sequentially. What are the episodes that you, or what are the dynamics that you go back to? Because I will tell you the one, my favorite, but.
The episode on the ship when they learn of their father's death.
Oh, that was amazing.
Yes, I watched that episode I watched that a lot. That one I've probably seen 20 times.
What I loved about, I mean, I loved many things about that show, but one of the things that struck me about that show, and I'm not sure if I can think of another one that did this, but it had, part of its brilliance was it had all these comedy duos. So it had Tom and Greg, right? And then it had, what is the one Culkin play, the son, the young Roman Roy and Jerry, right? And maybe there was another one, but they had these comedy duos where their back and forth was like this a very high level sitcom banter. And then of course they had all these tragedies and dramas and things like that. But you'd get these scenes of these people just like verbally brutalizing each other in the funniest fucking way. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think people recall how funny it is.
Yeah.
There's also a sense of wit, not just laugh out loud funny, but wit. Just brilliant, educated, tossed off lines that reveal the high education of a person, too, that you can insult each other
at that level
with a 170 IQ. And the dynamics, too, the dysfunctions. I know some of the critical thing is like, well, how do I relate to these billionaires? And thought every poor family is the same way, too. You know, they might be fighting over the 1980 Chrysler Cordoba, but they're still fighting for prestige and possessions.
Well, and also the connections, some of them were real, right? The connections between the siblings were profoundly dysfunctional, but they were real.
Yeah, they obviously loved each other, one another. There's that scene when they're in the kitchen on the island. You say things like that. Their cabin, whatever, 5,000 square feet it was. And they're in the kitchen and they're playing like they did when they were kids. And it's so heartbreaking to watch because you know they're on the trajectory to tragedy.
Yeah, right.
But you watch it and you think, oh, man. And then you go back to your own childhood and the wishes of things to be better. I mean, I think growing up, I was addicted to comedy. But I think as a TV watcher now, tragedy draws me more. I fall asleep to comedies. I stay awake because of tragedy.
What are the shows in the last 5 or 10 years or 15 years that have had a strong kind of native element?
Reservation Dogs,
which I haven't watched, but I watched that other one that he made, The Lowdown with Ethan Hawke. Have you seen that one?
A little bit.
Is Reservation Dogs good? I mean, for you?
It's a good show. It's a really good show. I am its grandfather.
You're telling me you have a complicated relationship to its success and attention it's received.
No, not its attention. I'm glad of its critical and commercial acclaim. I'm really happy for Sterling Harjo, the creator, and everybody involved. I'm extremely happy for them. Proud of them. I've known them forever. But what I dislike is the critical response to it had no clue that it's part of multiple generations of native creation. It was received in the outside world like it had arisen by itself. Spontaneous life. And in fact, it comes from a tradition in the native world that I would say started with James Welch, went to me, and then went to Reservation Dogs. Because of the cluelessness of cultural critics in general about the native world, they had no clue that it was a generational success.
And then there's the problem of you, which is semi but not totally canceled and inescapable, right? I mean, yeah. I don't know if there's anybody comparable to you in any of these worlds that has to be reckoned with. You know, I don't know, like...
Yeah, reckoned with. I'm not going to go into that, but I'll just say, yeah.
No, I know. And I know you don't want to go into it, but I mean, it's just like one can't talk. I was going to say, is that just because of a cluelessness in terms of the tradition, or just the difficulty or the complexity of how to deal with you?
It's complicated.
Yeah.
But if you watch Smoke Signals, the movie we made in 1998, you will see that I am the father.
Yeah. What else? Okay. So Superstore, Succession.
Parks and Recreation. What's on right now that I'm loving? Oh, The Pit. Oh, my God.
Just started watching that. That's really, that's...
The Pit is catching Succession in my mind.
What is it about? I mean, I've only watched 2 episodes. What is it about that show that's so propulsive?
Again, its father is ER.
Well, it's the same people, right? It's John Wells and Noah White.
Noah Wiley. So part of it is there's strong,
but it's better than ER.
No, it's way better than ER. But the love, ER we loved when we were in our 20s, right? ER. So it's sort of like The Pit is sort of like you're at your 40th class reunion or 30th class reunion, and you've met your high school sweetheart, and you're both single. And you look across the room at each other, and you've both gained 20 pounds and you're wrinkled, but you look across the room and you're both divorced once or twice.
Right. You know how to fuck better or something like
yes,
that.
Yes, and you look across the room and you're like, whoa, I can simultaneously embrace my youth and also have a new life. And I think The Pit is the aged high school sweetheart. And is smarter and is more charismatic and is more diverse, is more representative of the world we live in.
Yes.
And tragedy and comedy. And so I think, I just made up that analogy. But yeah, The Pit is the high school sweetheart we've reunited with, and we're smarter, they're smarter, and the relationship is even deeper.
I'm curious, have you seen, this was something I was thinking about when you were talking about old high school friends of yours who've kind of gone Trumpy or gone dark in a sort of political way. Have you seen those? I'll get to the question here. Have you seen that skit on Saturday Night Live, the Black Jeopardy skit with Tom Hanks?
Oh, yeah. One of the great ones.
I mean, the premise being that like the culture of like poor white folks, overlaps to an extraordinary degree with the culture of kind of, poor black folks or something like that. And I was thinking about that in terms of like the res and kind of how some of that Trump world, which has all of these kind of rural signifiers and sort of Western signifiers and Southern signifiers and things like that, to what extent it overlaps with sort of reservation culture or some reservation culture, like, and how does that play out? Are there Trumpies on the res?
Oh, yeah.
Or is there so much inoculation for other sort of historical contingent reasons that doesn't happen?
No, I mean, it has changed over the years. When I was a kid, when I was young, I would venture that, like in the black community, I would venture 90% of the Indians who did vote were Democrats. But that has changed over the years. And in fact, with Trump, it's still a large majority of Native voters voted for Harris and voted for Biden before that. But there was a significant change in the voting, as with other minority communities, that went toward Trump. And especially in semi-rural and rural reservations that turn toward Trump is based on a rural identity. And you always hear the thing about people can be economically conservative and socially liberal. And that's part of the change. But, in the Native world, our culture is, in a sense, conservative. We live our past, very religious, have a very rigid sense of morals and ethics. And the leftists, the liberals of the last 20 years, no matter how much I agree with whatever policies we're talking about, I mean, I consider myself, I do those quizzes online, what are you?
Right.
And I'm always in the commie section. But I think the way in which the left and Democrats have presented themselves really contradicts a lot of Native belief. And nobody thinks about a traditional culture like Native Americans as being conservative, but there is an inherent conservatism. So as a lot of people have said who voted for Trump, they didn't vote for Trump as much as they voted against the rest of us.
I was going to say that was the piece of it, what I was going to ask you about, which is also the sort of hostility to or alienation from or feeling of being condescended to when you get to whatever you want to call them, the liberal elite, the professional managerial class. I mean, when you read the stories, and I haven't read the story, though maybe they were out there about shifts among Native people towards Trump, but certainly when you read the stories about, Latino people, I mean, particularly men, Latino men and Black men, a lot of it was precisely the same sense of alienation vis-a-vis the elites, the liberal elites, the cultural elites, that white folks who voted for Trump felt. And I'm wondering if that's like, that you think there's that experience amongst Native people too, working class poor Native people too, that they don't like us. They're not like us. They don't like us. They look down on us, something like that.
I don't like us.
Right. And you're one of us. Yeah.
I dislike almost everybody who votes like me. So, as the higher percentage of sharing a vote gets, the more I dislike you.
Right.
If you and I vote like 90% for the 90% of the same Democrats, I'm not going to like you.
I mean, I agree with you. The problem is I dislike the people on the other side too. So, where does that leave me?
So, yeah, there's a big part of that is the condescension. Basically, it comes down to winning or losing elections. And you're going to lose if you keep on insisting that every white person is a racist. You're going to lose if you keep on insisting that the entire country is racist. You're going to lose. So it's a bad game plan.
Are the people who turn, the Black, the Hispanic, the Native people who turn towards Trump, is that specific plank of wokeness alienating to them as well? Or is it the other? Is it the gender pieces of it? Is it the kind of the language piece of it? But the specific thing, sure, if you want to win elections in a majority white society, you should stop telling white people they're all racist, right? That's like because that's going to alienate the white people, right? Because they're the ones who are being told. Is that piece of it alienating? Is there some way in which even that is alienating to a lot of minorities, or is it the other stuff?
I think in the Native world, and I would guess it's the same in other communities, it's being anti-patriotic that is the turnoff. So I would venture that conservative Indians are among the most patriotic people in the country. I mean, we celebrate the military, Native culture. We have strong binary gender roles in Native culture. I mean, even now.
Celebrate the military because a lot of kids go into the military?
Warrior culture, fighting for the country. So at every powwow, there's a military flag flying and a POW MIA flag flying. You'll hear the Star Spangled Banner everywhere. So I think there's an inherent conservatism in the Native world, even among, lefty Natives like me. I grew up with that patriotism, that being anti-patriotic is also a turnoff for some Natives. Enough Natives to where there is a turn toward Trump. Even though I think the most unpatriotic people in the country are the MAGAs.
Right.
I mean, they hate the country far more than any leftist does.
Right. I wonder sometimes, and this to go back to what we were saying about how the right wing got de-churched, but I also wonder about the effect of not the left per se, but the elites being de-churched too. And I'm Jewish, and I always grew up, we were just secular. I've never felt comfortable in sort of religious environment. So I say this as somebody who just wants to be part of no congregation, but at the same time, at least when the elites were kind of mainline Protestants, right? When they were all Congregationalists or Presbyterians or whatever, Methodists, maybe there was something that anchored them in these shared American values, right? That in whether it was military service or kind of soft Christianity or something like that. I don't know what to do now. Everybody hates us, but it's that's our culture, right? It's what is that mainline Protestant culture look like when you remove the church from it? It just looks like people turning politics into a kind of annoying, censorious church lady religion or something like that, which everybody hates. And, I don't know what to do about that. That is our culture.
The left has retained their prudism
right.
of Christianity and has retained none of the sense of community or responsibility to everybody. The general notion of charity toward all, kindness toward all. The best parts of Christianity have been left behind, and a lot of the terrible traits have been embraced, especially, prudes. How can the left be prudes? Prudes and libertine at the same time.
Well, libertine in what sense? I mean, we're very square in our behavior.
The artistic expression.
Yes.
Bridgerton. I know enough about Bridgerton to know or to watch movies. I watched an episode of Grey's Anatomy, a couple episodes, and I hadn't watched it much over the years, but because I saw a highlight on Instagram of a hospital shooter episode, I thought, oh, that looks compelling. So I watched it. And even in the midst of this school shooting, it was horny. So, and this episode, though, was 16 years ago. So maybe there's less horniness on network TV.
Well, there is less horniness on network TV, certainly. There was a period of anti-horniness, which I think fortunately we're on the other side of. But it's interesting. Bridgerton's interesting. Maybe you'll watch it at some point. You could, you come back and talk to me about it. But it's yes, it's horny, it's libertine, and at the same time, and this is why it's such great pop culture. At the same time, Bridgerton is the name of this family, And there is no better, there is no greater, more enthusiastic affirmation, in a sense, of the kind of bourgeois family than Bridgerton. I mean, it is so much about the family. It is so much about finding love and marriage. And then there's some hot sex, and sometimes the hot sex is between people who are or will be married, and sometimes it's with, whatever, hookers or something like that. So, but it is elite culture in that sense, right? It's like libertine in its cultural expression, but underneath it all, it's just a deep, deep affirmation of like the bourgeois family.
That sounds interesting to me.
And nobody behaviorally is a greater inhabitor of bourgeois norms than, upper middle class progressive elites, right? I mean,
my gosh.
So,
Rob Henderson writes about this, and other people write about it as well. More moderate liberals and conservatives are free to write about this and not lose their audience. But, that they live out traditional values while judging.
Right.
While judging those same, the public judgment of values that they privately live.
You had some post on Substack the other day talking about, you mentioned Grey's Anatomy, that you'd actually been pitching a medical show in Seattle at the same time to the networks. And you said maybe it shot a pilot or something, and then...
I didn't know about the show till later on, but the first year, it's called pilot season, where you're developing a show and you're trying to get the pilot to film the first episode, which you hope leads to a multi-episode order. I mean, there have been all sorts of pilots filmed that never went beyond that just filmed one thing. But I developed a hospital series set in Seattle Children's Hospital. So immediately one of the things was, we're going to watch kids die. And you'd have to explain, no, 97% of kids in real and fictional children's hospitals live. But our nickname for it was Dead Babies because of that, because of that conception. So I developed it one season. They eventually said no. We almost got the pilot. And then the second, they brought it back to develop again, which is really rare, to bring back a dead project to try again. The dude in charge then was Steve McPherson, and he said he kept dreaming about it. He kept dreaming the series. So brought it back and tried again, and it came down to a decision whether to go forward with this other show, a hospital series set in Seattle, and they chose the other one, which was Grey's Anatomy. And 22 seasons later, you think they'd realize they made a mistake.
Right. That's the same maker. That's Bridgerton. That's Shonda Rhimes, one of our
yeah, that's right.
One of our great pop culture geniuses of our era.
TV genius. I mean, of course.
I mean, no shade on your show.
My show would have made 14 episodes and starred two young people who would become bigger stars later. That's what my show would have been.
So I'm trying to remember. So, I mean, you made Smoke Signals. Did you direct Smoke Signals?
No, I was writer and producer.
Okay. And what else I'm sure a million of your things have been optioned in various ways, but what else?
No, I haven't optioned anything. I optioned my young adult novel, which is my biggest book, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. I resisted optioning it for decades, essentially, before I signed with a company I wouldn't option it primarily because nobody would contractually guarantee me that only enrolled members of Native American tribes would play natives in the show. Nobody would guarantee me, essentially, that we would cast no pretend Indians, or we wouldn't cast a Cuban as a Native American.
Yeah.
So nobody would guarantee me that, so I wouldn't option anything. And only finally, until somebody guaranteed me that, would I sign the option. And we developed it for a few years, but COVID essentially killed it.
I mean, is that still something you'd like to do? Make a show? Make another movie?
Yeah. I mean, especially now that our 2002 tiny little movie, I mean, it's small and weird. I had no mainstream ambitions whatsoever with this movie. Yeah, I would love to make another movie. In fact, I've been working on the Smoke Signals 2 screenplay. I wrote a full version with no eye toward budget. And since then, every draft has been making it cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And I figured out a way to make it where there's 75% of the show will be in one location and will only require 2 cameras. So I have winnowed it down to where we can make it for 37 cents.
And what books are you working on right now, if any?
The next book is going to be the sequel to my young adult novel, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. I'm just about set to deliver it and to go looking for a publisher. And it's called The Magic and Tragic Year of My Broken Thumb. True Diary was about his freshman year. Broken Thumb is about his sophomore year. I'm also compiling my poetry manuscript, which will probably be out next year, the book. And, Substack has made me incredibly prolific. The responsibility to the audience that you have to produce, because, some of them are paying for it, the responsibility to them. And then the love, the immediate response is addicting as hell. Because, as a traditional book writer, you work for years and then wait for years to get a response to the work that, in a sense, you've moved past it because you're working on something else. So it feels sometimes like somebody loves a version of you that existed 8 years ago but doesn't exist now. But with Substack, I have posted things I'd written that morning. So the immediate love for the creative process is there. So I thought it was over 400 poems, what I thought was going to be, but it's going to be, over 600 pages of poetry I've published on Substack.
Wow.
Yeah, in 4.5 years, over 600 pages. And I've gotten millions of reads.
On your poetry.
Yeah, on my poetry. More people read my poetry than they do my fiction and nonfiction on Substack. So I think, I'm not sure. I'm sure there's some Middle Eastern Sufi poets who get a bigger audience.
Right.
I know Mary Oliver gets a huge audience. Billy Collins gets a huge audience. But, I'm at least top 10 in poets being read worldwide on Substack.
All right, last two questions. These are questions I try to remember to ask everybody. So who else should I have on my show? If my show is about the contemporary American intellectual scene, who would be good guests for me to have on?
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, get Sterling on. Get Sterling Harjo on. I would say, all my friends are popping into my head because, being a nepotistic bastard. I think you'd love Jess Walter, the writer Jess Walter, who's, he and I grew up. We didn't know each other into our adulthood, but we grew up in the same area. Oh, man, get a TV creator on there. Somebody who keeps failing. That would be so interesting. Nobody's popping into mind right now, but people who have failed to, who I like, somebody who would be fascinating to me, somebody who had one hit television show they made and has never really reached that pinnacle again. I can't think of anybody in particular right now. People do a lot of coverage and shows of the successful ones.
Right.
But I think the heartbreak of TV
it's a hard business.
Would be the subject to pursue. I think so. And in terms of writers, you've probably had Klosterman, who's incredible.
No, I've thought about that, though. I should have him on. Yeah.
Another friend popped into my head, the author of Lemony Snicket books, Daniel Handler. I think you'd have a great time with Daniel.
Okay. He's great. We read those books to my kids. He's pretty...
and he's a total pop culture addict.
Okay.
Constantly reading. And then I'm going into producers I know who'd be probably fascinating to you. And I don't even know that they've ever done media. Or maybe they never get asked.
I'm trying to get, she said she'd do it, but I have to wait on her schedule, is Lena Dunham, who I'm a big fan of.
Oh my gosh. See, that's the kind of people I'm thinking of too.
All right, last question. I don't think you host a podcast or have, but if you did, what would your podcast be about?
Music, probably. I have an idea. Essentially, the show would be talking to ordinary folks, just civilians, as I refer to them, people who do not participate in the arts, except to be audience, to talk about the songs that matter most to them. Probably end up being friends of friends, and then it would go down the line to total strangers. 90% of my communication with my friends is about basketball and rock music.
I don't think it would need this, but it would be great if you could actually really use the song. You get into some weird copyright stuff there.
The place where you could do it because of how the structure works, but I'm averse to it, is Spotify. You can use the songs on Spotify for Spotify podcasts.
So you would be very ambivalent if Spotify came to you and they're like, we were listening to Dan's podcast.
Incredibly mixed feelings.
Here's $10 million.
Yes. My feelings are less mixed. If
the dollar amount goes up. Well, Sherman, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. Big fan of your work. I hope you get the TV show. I want you to write and produce and, direct if you feel like it. I want like a Hoosiers style, basketball team on the res or something that like goes to the state championship. Or maybe it's you at the white high school, like your actual one.
Well, that would have been True Diary. That was a basketball-oriented young adult novel. That would have been that story. I have a screenplay in the drawer about a Native American basketball team.
If any big time producers are listening,
I can open the drawer, big time producer.
All right. Well, I really appreciate it.
Cool. Thank you so much. It's been fun.
This has been another episode of Eminent Americans. Big thanks to my editor, producer extraordinaire, Robert Scaramuccia. Big thanks as well to Alec Ownsworth of Clap Your Hands, Say Yeah for letting us use his music for our intro and outro. If you liked what you heard, and I imagine you did, if you've made it this deep into the episode, then please rate us on whatever the relevant podcasting platform is. And if you have any questions or comments, email me at djops@gmail.com. That's djopps@gmail.com. I promise to respond at least until the faraway and probably mythical day when I have such a vast audience that I can't in good conscience respond to all the emails while still upholding my responsibility to my loved ones. Have a great day.